Hey, this is Nate Wells, and this is True Cove. Check out our podcast, that Go for Hockey podcast, for the latest news and updates on University of Minnesota hockey. You can find us on iTunes, and we're also on the Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
That's elite.
The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
Welcome to the Giles and the Goalie podcast. I am Giles Farrell. Find me on Twitter's at Giles Farrell. Across from me, as always, is Ben Remington.
Hello.
Find him on Twitter at Ben Remington. We are back once again in the lovely Cupboard Under the Stairs studio, the home of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
Only the finest towels.
The lovely and talented Justin at the helm here today. Mm-hmm. He is our Mr. Sulu. He just navigates us through the through the worst things possible, and he gets us through it. He's that good.
We needed all the help we could get. Let's be honest.
We needed a Mr. Sulu at the helm. If anyone gets that Star Trek reference, good on you. And if not, I've scared many people away now because I dropped a Star Trek reference.
Well, it's not like that's the first time you've dropped a Star Trek reference.
No, but I usually save it for later in the show, and
that's true.
People quit listening anyway. So
that's true. Yeah.
We have a good show for you in store. We are going to evaluate the Minnesota Wild kind of at their halfway mark of the regular season. We're going to have a little bit of extended Bruce Boudreau discussion, if you will. Then kind of the usual stuff at the end. Mm-hmm. In our jersey segment this week will be our Mount Poopmore of hockey jerseys.
I was very proud of that name, by the way.
I mean, Dan also did bring up a very good point with calling it the Mount St. Helens.
Yeah, but the thing is, we're picking 4. So, like, Mount St. Helens didn't erupt 4 times. That would be really bad. Like, that would have killed a lot of people. And bad jerseys don't kill people. They're just ugly to look at.
That's true. But that is something you can also find on our YouTube channel. As we did last week with our Mount Rushmore of jerseys, we made it a video segment because it is more of a visual segment.
Yes.
So we want to have you digest that way if you are so inclined. So do give a look to our YouTube channel as well for that and all of our lovely pre- and post-game videos, which if you watched Saturday night's, it was quite lengthy and ranty, which I'm going to come back to on this podcast here today. But also one last bit of news. This is our not our last week. We have 1 week left until the Giles and the Goalie podcast records on location in lovely Las Vegas, Nevada.
Well, it's next week. Next Sunday. This is our last show in Minnesota.
Till the next week.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to get at. Okay. I butchered it.
That was really confusing. I was like, wait, we're leaving.
That's why I said next week we'll be on location.
I don't know about you, but I'm leaving on Thursday, so.
Yeah, no, I'll be there. Ben will be there. We are also trying to get some Minnesota Wild fans together prior to the game on Monday between the Golden Knights and Minnesota Wild. Mm-hmm. A lovely 3 p.m. local start in Las Vegas.
Yeah, a little afternoon action.
And I love a good afternoon matinee.
Oh, tremendous.
But we are going to be trying to get Wild fans together at the Beer House in Las Vegas, right next to the arena. Mm-hmm. I think we're starting our event at like 11 in the morning because we are going to record a podcast somewhere in there. So
that day on Monday?
Yeah.
Okay, we're not doing it on Sunday?
No.
Okay. I didn't know.
I thought we talked about this.
We might have.
It's also listed out right there on the event page, recording of the Giles and the Goalie podcast.
Oh, well, wonderful.
If we get enough people, maybe we'll have like listener questions.
Yeah?
If we get more than 2 people.
Well, I mean, Yeah, I don't know about that.
Could happen.
One other thing that we have going on, if you're listening to this show on Monday morning or early afternoon, Monday night, we will be boothcasting.
Yes, boothcast.
Yep. So
Very excited.
We announced it on the Twitter page. It's pretty easy, actually. It's you just find the Boothcast app. It is very widely available, I believe.
I believe right now it's only available on iTunes.
Is it only in iTunes right now?
I believe
they didn't make over to Android yet. So at least on the iTunes, in the iTunes store. So you can find Boothcast there, and it's as simple as signing in with your Twitter login, your Twitter handle, and it kind of does the rest for you. And there's some options that you can purchase things and whatnot, but it's free otherwise, so that you don't have to actually buy the app. You don't have to buy any kind of listening or anything like that. But Giles and I will be commentating on the Wild and Bruins game Monday night.
Flyers.
Oh yeah, why do I keep saying? I said Bruins in the email too. Yeah, so the Fightin' Chuck Fletchers, we'll be commentating on the Fightin' Chuck Fletchers against the Minnesota Wild on Monday night at 6 p.m. Obviously, the East Coast time start. So that should be a lot of fun. Interesting to see how that goes. Interesting to see if we can commentate on an entire hockey game without getting tired of ourselves. Yeah, we'll have to figure out some kind of gimmick or something.
You may have to drive the boat at some points with my GIF making.
True. Oh no, yeah, that's fine. I can be the Tony Pants, and you can just guffaw once in a while. You can just guffaw once in a while like Greenlay does. So.
Oh, man. I'm gonna start drinking now.
It's probably not a bad idea. So,
yes, that's exciting. We met with Miles, the owner of Boothcast, like a month ago, and he kind of went over everything with us, and it is definitely something worth checking out, especially if you're like me, you love watching playoff football. But you don't really give a crap for the announcers. Like, not many people like Joe Buck, so you can mute Joe Buck and you can turn on this Otherwise Fine app, and you can get probably significantly better commentary. Or if you don't enjoy watching Troy Aikman be like stoned on live television, you can probably get somebody who's going to give you more insightful analysis.
Well,
so
and I was out and about last night, but he did the Cowboys game last night too, didn't he? How does he get every single Cowboys game on TV? I don't understand.
They're
like
America's team.
Well, right, but like he just continually tongues the butthole of that football team, and it's like, how does he keep getting assigned to that every single time they have a playoff game or like a primetime game or even an afternoon game? He's on it every time. He's like their personal announcer.
That should be the title of this episode, but I can't in good conscience pull myself to write that down. It's
not anything anyone hasn't said before.
All right. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to get a message from Tom.
That was still PG.
My title.
No, that was still PG-13.
We'll see. Maybe we'll find something later on. But anyway, look forward to that on Monday for Boothcast, and then we'll probably give it a go again a few times down the line as well. But Monday night, 6 p.m. against the Flyers. Again, you can go to the App Store on iTunes, search Boothcast, one word, and download and listen to our Otherwise Fine commentary. All right, Ben. Reviewing the last week of the Minnesota Wild, and I don't know where to start, but we're going to start. We got to start somewhere. So we're going to start last Monday in Montreal against the Montreal Canadiens. Minnesota Wild win 1-0 over the Carey Price-led Montreal Canadiens. Carey Price looking like the old Carey Price that we're all used to, very sharp, but a Jeff Petrie mishap gives a puck right to Mikhail Granlund, who buries a puck into an empty net. Wild win 1-0. They get a big win over the Canadiens, making their win streak up to a modest 3. 3 games in a row. And then the Wild follow up the next night in Boston. Apparently they had some issues on the tarmac trying to get out of Montreal.
Oh, did you hear about that?
They didn't. If you didn't know, the Wild did not get to Boston until like 3 a.m. So apparently there was no time to sleep between then and the 7 p.m. local start that they had.
That's only like 15 hours.
Yeah, not enough time to sleep, I guess, for those old guys. But the Wild get smoked 4-0 by the Boston Bruins. Just a game where they had absolutely nothing to offer. We both featured in the video recap on our YouTube and our Facebook, as we did a lovely edited version in which I did not pay attention to how I transitioned out of your video right into mine. As I said, thank you, Ben, that was awful.
Yeah,
and
which I thought was hilarious.
Give you the warm, fuzzy feeling when I made the transition over. But anyway, the Wild return home to where they start a stretch of 5 out of 6 games at XL Energy Center with the Winnipeg Jets, and the Wild won 3-2 over the Jets. They moved to a modest 3-0 against Winnipeg this season after getting waxed by Winnipeg last year. I don't understand how the Wild are 3-0 against the Winnipeg Jets this season, but they are. And we will come back to this also in a little bit in our Bruce Boudreau segment, but the Wild got goals from Jordan Greenway and 2 from Jason Zucker, who had snapped a pretty lengthy goal-scoring drought. I think he only had 1 in the previous 14, so getting a pair of goals for him to get him hopefully off the goal-scoring drought was very good. And then finally, Saturday night, the Wild get the Detroit Red Wings, the 3rd worst team in the National Hockey League. And boy, oh boy. Thomas Vanek, you may have heard of him. He scored twice. Tyler Bertuzzi, nephew of former Minnesota Wild nemesis Todd Bertuzzi, had a hat trick for the Detroit Red Wings. The Wild get run out of their own building 5-2. They took a 2-1 lead early in the second period. Nino Niederreiter scored on the power play. Luke Cunnin scored at the end of the first, tie the game, but the Wild go up 2-1, and then the Red Wings fire off 4 consecutive goals, with Vanek scoring 28 seconds after Niederreiter did to take the lead, and then again later in the second period, and then Bertuzzi with the pair to get a hat trick in the third. And that led off a pretty lengthy rant by yours truly on the recap, but we're going to come back to that in our Bruce Boudreau segment, because Bruce was also pretty dissecting of his team on Saturday night. But that is your week in review for the Minnesota Wild. 2 pretty decent wins and then 2 pretty terrible losses that make you run for the old liquor cabinet.
Yeah, it really, this is kind of being a Wild fan, right? Like, I wrote an article earlier this season how being a Wild fan is death by 1,000 paper cuts. And this week just kind of embodied that, where it's just like, the win in Montreal, that was not a fun hockey game to watch. They won the game, and yay, that's nice that Jeff Petrie basically passed the puck to Mikael Granlund right in front of his own goalie. But that was not, a lot of fun to watch. The game against Boston was an absolute disaster. I mean, that was, home at 3 a.m. or not. Like, I just don't understand how you can't even show up to that hockey game against a pretty good squad. I mean, Boston's pretty solid, and you got to get up for those kind of games. And but then they do get up for the Jets. Like, they totally get up for the Jets.
But they didn't get to their hotel until 3 a.m. Did you know that? Yeah.
Again, it was a 7 o'clock local time game. Like, I don't know how. I mean, sure, that's a pain in the ass, and I've traveled enough to know that travel wipes you out. But they flew from Montreal to Boston. It's not like it's a long flight. I mean, honest to God, like that's got to be like an hour and a half flight tops. I mean, it's probably more like an hour. So it just, I don't know. I don't get the excuse there. And then the Jets game, like you said, they do get up for that. They play probably maybe the best 40 minutes we see this team play all season. I mean, considering the opponent especially. I mean, they really mopped the floor with the Jets for the first 40 minutes. The last period, they literally took off. They turtled like no one has ever turtled before, not recording a single shot on goal in the third period. And that apparently was a sign of things to come for Saturday night, where, like I said, luckily I was out and about, which I'll get to later. But, man, did they just not How do you not show up to a terrible team too? Like they no show against Boston, and then they show against Detroit. It's just like, you can't get up for the good teams. You can't get up for the bad teams. Like you can get up for the Jets, but you can't sustain it through a whole game. I don't know. There's no understanding the motivation level of this team, and I think that's incredibly frustrating.
Millbury roasted the Wild pretty good after Thursday's game against the Jets for turtling in the third period, and I actually agreed with him. One of the incredibly rare instances where I actually agreed with something Mike Millbury said. But
yeah, it hurts.
Also, how weird is it for Minnesota and Winnipeg to get an NBCSN game?
True. Yeah, on a Thursday, no less.
That is, yeah, that's something. But NBCSN really trying to get the good Canadian teams featured on their schedule. But anyway, we're going to come back to this. So quickly segmenting out of the week in review, we are going to kind of assess the Minnesota Wild roster at the halfway point of the regular season on kind of what the players are on pace for points-wise, and maybe kind of briefly go over if they've done as expected, done better, done under what we've expected of them. But we'll kind of run down the list here. Zach Parise, as we record, 40 points in 43 games. He is on pace for 74 points, which is, I must say, it's way over expectations.
Yeah, you think so? I mean, it is, but it is assuming that he stays healthy the entire time, and I think that's been the caveat with him for a couple of seasons now. Is if he can stay healthy for an entire season, he could probably put up points like this. Like you wouldn't be shocked by Zach Parise scoring 30-some goals in a season if he played a full season. You're probably more surprised by him playing a full season. It's
not the 30-some goals I'm more surprised of. It is a fact he's also equally dishing it out with assists.
Sure, yeah.
Which he's just been more of the net front presence guy and getting those greasy goals, but his highest point total since he's been with the Wild was 62 points in 74 games in 2014-15. And he is clearly on pace to eclipse that here this season, as you said, if he can stay off the injury list. Right. But he's done way over expectations. We weren't sure what we were going to get from him this year, and every night I'm just more pleasantly impressed with what he does. So I say he is doing way beyond expectations, and notable snub for the last man voting of the NHL All-Star game. Man, does that really rub salt in the wound when he loses to Landeskog?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Landeskog's having an incredible year. I'll give him that. That he's the only. I mean, there's only one line on that entire hockey team, and he's on it. So. Yeah, it is, but it just kind of goes to show. I mean, with those teeny tiny minuscule All-Star game rosters, I mean, what do you expect? There's a lot of people who got snubbed this year. Mitch Marner, Parise. There's a lot of guys that didn't make it, so I don't feel as bad about it.
Just dump that every team needs a player rule.
That too, but I mentioned it in my mailbag last week or 2 weeks ago. Maybe expand the rosters just a touch. You've only got 2 defensemen or 3 defensemen. No, 2. You've got 2 defensemen on every roster, and that's it. That is not many. You've got 8 defensemen in the entire league that are all-stars, and that's it. That just doesn't seem like a whole lot. So, I don't know. It just I'm glad I don't care that much about all-star games. I get the prestige of being named to it, but I'm over all-star games in general.
Yeah. Moving quickly along here, Mikael Granlund on pace for 73 points at 39 points presently, and I must say he's done kind of as expected this season. I wouldn't say he's done better or worse than what we expected. I'd say he's right at that line of as expected.
Sure.
So Ryan Suter, 28 points this season already, on pace for 52 points. Really a slow start to the season for him, in which, again, we didn't know what to expect from him coming off that catastrophic ankle injury that he has. But I got to say, really more recently, you can kind of maybe see him getting back to what he used to be. But I guess if I am, you put a gun to my head and I had to pick, I'd say probably just slightly, maybe under expectations, but
not in the points perspective, but maybe in the defense.
Yeah, just bit. Overall defensively.
Tony, our friend Tony Abbott from The Athletic wrote early this season, or not early this season, maybe a couple weeks ago, about how this is kind of the new Ryan Suter a little bit. He's a lot more productive from a point standpoint, but his defense has been a little bit leakier than you're used to. And I don't know, there's a lot of different reasons for that, but it is interesting to see. So point production, you got to be happy with, but he's had some defensive letdowns that are uncharacteristic, for the Ryan Suter that we knew in the past. So yeah, maybe a little underwhelming.
Eric Stahl, 27 points on 43 games and on pace for 50 points, 24 goals, 26 assists. And I think you and I can both agree here that this is an easy kind of under expectations considering what he did last year. And I think it's pretty much nightly now. Michael Russo is pointing out how bad Eric Stahl is and has been, and I don't know what to do. He's kind of making it a much more difficult decision. I said way earlier on this season that the Wild should probably re-sign Eric Stahl, but it's becoming more and more of a kind of a coin flip decision as to kind of what needs to happen with him, because he's not playing really kind of up to the par that we've seen him in 2.5 seasons in the Minnesota Wild uniform. And you got to hope that at some point he turns it around. And I say this more just for the sake of this season, because you see, you look back to what Eric Stahl did in the last 2 seasons, and what he was really good at doing was finding the open space in the ice to create scoring chances. And he was so good at doing that. And he would, it was creating odd man rushes, just cleaning up pucks in front of the net, whatever, you name it. He was really good at doing that. And this year, he really hasn't been. He hasn't been kind of the same driver of offense that he was. And something, I don't know. I don't know if it's just kind of a lingering thing where it's, last year of his contract or what, but just not a good thing to see from Eric Stahl, that kind of the things he was doing so well have kind of dried up here this year.
Yeah, it is a little weird, and he was a finisher. He was maybe the one guy that you could count on in this team to actually finish. And now, he's kind of like all the rest, where it's a missed net here and it's a missed pass there, and it just seems like he's lost that touch for scoring. But like you said, it's really a double-edged sword, because it's like, well, I don't know. Maybe it poses an even more difficult decision, because it's like, do the Wild re-sign him now?
Yeah, we don't know.
If they do, it's a little bit of a catch-22, because it sucks that he's having a terrible season, but I mean, that price is coming down. He had a great year last year, and if he were to follow that up again, he would have gotten absolutely paid this summer. But the season that he's having right now, like a 50-point season, that's a little bit more garden variety. So it's like, maybe the Wild are able to re-sign him now and not have to worry about not being able to re-sign some of the younger players that they'd like to keep around. Maybe he is around for, a little bit more of a bargain price on a maybe tiny bit of a shorter deal in his mid-30s, which you certainly wouldn't expect after his 42-goal season last year.
Jared Spurgeon, 26 points presently, and then he on pace for 13 goals, 35 assists, 48 points.
That's pretty good.
That's very good, and I think we've come to know how good Jared Spurgeon is, but I must say, especially here in the last couple of weeks in the absence of Matt Dumba, Jared Spurgeon has really kind of risen to another level that not sure we knew he had, but even though we think very highly of him, but he has found it. And so I will say he is kind of going above expectations this year again, but you can probably just say, from our love of Jared Spurgeon, that he'd probably be right at expectations. But just another fine season, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that if our friends at Evolving Wild were here, they would be barking about him being an All-Star Game snub.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you think of Jared Spurgeon, and I think he's exceeding expectations from a point production standpoint. you're used to him creating offense with stretch passes and kind of his general solid transition game because he's definitely the maestro at that kind of stuff. But now he's scoring goals. I mean, he's scoring goals. He's getting primary assists where he's setting guys up and he's shooting the puck and guys are in front of the net and cleaning it up and that kind of thing. So definitely very welcome out of Jared Spurgeon. I really hope that somehow, some way, he's able to continue this after Matt Dumba comes back. I know he's probably getting more power play time now and whatnot, but I would love to see this Jared Spurgeon all the time, not just when Matt Dumba's on the shelf.
Mikko Koivu, 26 points, on pace for 48 points this season, which...
I tussle with this one. This is
a tough one.
It seems like that's kind of the number for him. Like 50 points is right around that tipping point for him.
Yeah, here's his last 5 seasons of point production: 54, 48, 56, 58, 45.
Yeah, so I mean, he's right around 50 within a couple of points every year. As he gets older, I'm happy with a 50-point Mikko Koivu. If he continues to play, as well as he does on defense and kind of, contributing on that end. But
he really took a nosedive after I pointed out how good his production had been early in the season. So apologies to him for putting his season in a tailspin. But yeah, I would say, I don't know. I feel like it may be just a little slightly below expectations, but I don't know. He was doing so well early on, and now it's really kind of fallen off. So actually, I'll change my mind. I'll just say, I'll say he's at expectation. So
I call it a push. I think he's at expectations.
I have more of a recency bias factoring into my brain here.
But I also think that everybody on this list after him is not meeting expectations. If we want to go,
no, I see one.
One is got an extreme caveat to it. I mean, a ruptured pectoral.
We're gonna fire.
That's a pretty good caveat.
We're gonna fire right down the list here.
Sure.
Jason Zucker, 23 points, on pace for 43 points, 22 goals, 21 assists. I pointed this out this last week in an article that his production might not be there right now, goal scoring wise, and I'm gonna again come back to something he had with Bruce Boudreau in the week, but his production might not have been there, but he's still doing the things you want him to do, and so I feel like the production is just gonna start coming again very soon. And I also cited that just about the exact same time last season, he endured a very similar goal-scoring drought. Like, it's like a week off from what he has this season, but when he came out of that goal-scoring drought, he scored a goal in 4 straight, and I believe it was like 6 out of 7 games. Mm-hmm. And nobody remembers that he had that significant drought because he went on to score over 30 goals last year.
Right.
So, and then I kind of, cited some, advanced metrics and his shooting stats, which he's shooting the puck more and he's getting into good spots still to shoot. So I feel like he's not, the goals are going to come. He can't just keep having a 0 shooting percentage like he had pretty much since November 1st or November 4th, the second game in December, essentially.
Right.
So I feel like if he keeps doing these things that I cited out in that article that he's doing well, the goals and the production is going to come with it. But right now I feel like most people are going to say he's below expectations this season.
Yeah,
but I'll say it's a push right now.
Yeah, I'd say he's below right now, but but that again, he can always get hot, and he can.
Why are you so negative?
You know what's going to help if you tweeted his wife? That's going to help him play hockey better. I'm fairly certain that's how that works. The look of disdain on Giles right now is just great. I know.
I can't with that.
Let's blame that radio station. It's not our fault.
Anyway. Going down, and then we have Matt Dumba, and at 32 games this year, 12 goals, which at the time when he went out, just Just play some. Just play the Sarah McLachlan classic. I will remember you. I tweeted that at Tony during the week.
Oh.
But 12 goals, which was leading the NHL in defenseman at the time he went out with injury, 10 assists, and he was an absolute machine on the back end for the Wild in terms of offense, and 6 goals were on the power play. Obviously, his pace is kind of skewed because he's probably going to be out for a very significant period of time, so he's not going to have much more than what he has now.
Yeah.
But he was above expectations for me.
God, yeah.
Just a huge driver of offense on the blue line for the Wild, and specifically the power play, which really until the last 2 games was drier than the desert.
Abysmal. I think that what's striking to me is you look at this list, you go down the list of points for the Wild. Matt Dumba is still tied for 3rd in goals on this team by 1. He's behind Eric Stahl by 1.
Matt Dumba still has as many points as Charlie Coyle, and he has more points than Nino Niederreiter.
Yeah, talk about disappointing.
Yeah.
And he's missed 12 games now.
Here comes the disappointment.
Games. Yes, 12 games.
So, yes, Charlie Coyle next on the list, on pace for 41 points this season. Really up until the last, 2 weeks, he's been majorly disappointing. And he's really had a good go with Zach Parise and Luke Cunnin on the line.
Yeah.
But still, for the most part, a disappointing season for him. And then I will throw equally Nino Niederreiter right into that same boat, who is on pace for just 39 points this season as he embarks on, I believe it's year 2 of his 5-year contract.
Yep.
So not good and impressionable things to do under a new general manager for those guys. Mm-hmm. As they are seemingly right now the kind of the whipping boys for Wild fans.
Really are.
They've taken over that mantle from Tom Vanek, who...
Jason Pominville says hello.
Yeah. Vanek and Pominville. That should just be an award. The Tom Vanek and Jason Pominville Memorial.
Just have some old-timey...
Whipping Boy Award.
Some old-timey stocks, just...
The player, I should do that, like a mid-season awards segment, just make this award. The Tom Vanek, Jason Pominville Award. The player or players Wild fans love to whip on the most day in and day out. There you go. Next on the list, Jordan Greenway, on pace for 26 points. Really kind of had a little bit of a drought there, but I've been kind of preaching here in the last month. I've really, really liked a lot of aspects I'm seeing from his game, and he's got a couple goals here in the last week now, and hopefully the production starts to follow. Because I've said, just doing a lot of little things right for Jordan Greenway, and eventually when you do all that, production's going to come along with it. And I also like when he shoots, because he shoots to bleeping score. He doesn't just take a shot on the net and put it into the goaltender's chest.
Yeah.
He tries to pick a corner.
Yeah.
Boy, do I love that. That is refreshing.
He's been doing the Ray Bork drill. It's really nice to see.
I mean, he is a Boston boy, so he's probably got a lot of practice of trying to emulate Ray Bork.
Yeah, so it is nice to see. And I said the other night, he's basically like Coyle with more consistency. Granted, he doesn't have as many points as Coyle because he just really hasn't had any assists on the season. But you do like what you see out of him. Still young. I would still maybe file him in the mildly disappointing category, but I think he's a lot closer to a push than pretty much everyone we're talking about on this list otherwise. Because 26 points is kind of peanuts for an NHL hockey player in a full season. But essentially his first full season, I can kind of, give him a pass a little bit on that. I think that, he is showing flashes here and there. He's being that big body in front of the net that we kind of want Coyle to be. And he is being that scorer, like you said, shooting from the slot that we, like a lot of players to be. Coyle, Zucker, et cetera, et cetera. So mildly disappointing. I don't know. Is that your feeling on him? I mean, maybe a titch on the disappointing side.
I say,
but pretty close to push. Because he is basically a rookie.
I'd say a push. I kind of give him a little bit of a break because he is a rookie. It's his first full season of professional hockey, so I'll give him a push there. Next on the list, Jonas Brodin on pace for 20 points. I say for him as expected. He's defensively, he is what he is. He's not changed. And offensively, like, that's pretty much expected what you're going to get out of him. So he's a push for me.
I might be wrong on this. I always want more offense from Jonas Brodin than he has. I think he has it in him. That's just it. Like, I think that he has the capability to be not a 40, 50 point defenseman.
That was sucked out of him long ago as offense. It just
Mike Yeo sucked it out of him and never gave it back.
It's like in Harry Potter. Okay. Jonas Brodin is Sirius Black, and Mike Yeo was a Dementor. Just sucked his soul, sucked the offense right out of him. You just see the little flash of light come out of him. That's it. There's his offense. It's gone.
No, and that's probably fair. And I mean, if Jonas Brodin is only a 20-point guy for the rest of his career, I guess you could do worse on the second line than a guy who plays that good at defense. But I'll continue to be disappointed. That's just my thing.
Eric Fear on pace for 19 points on the fourth line. He's been pretty much consistently there on the fourth line. I'll just say, push. He is what he is, and I actually had pretty low expectations for him. So it's I guess a push is good for him. But Marcus Foligno, 7 points on the season right now, on pace for 13 points. I got to say I've been pretty disappointed in him. Below expectations for me. Shocking. I know as you you give me some kind of a glare, but
I've been king of
you've been
the haters of the Foligno haters club. So
Luke Cunnin up to now 5 points on the season, just 15 games. Kind of skews his kind of projections here, but did get a good goal last night against Detroit. Actually, I shouldn't say good goal. That was a pretty stoppable puck from Jimmy Howard, who the Wild just refused to shoot the puck on. We're going to come back to that. So I don't know. He just gets a push because he's spent more time in Iowa this year and just trying to get things right. Joel Eriksson Ek, 30 games with the Wild, 4 points, on pace for a lovely 7. I think we can both agree that he is well below expectations.
Did you know that they passed on? Never mind.
JT Brown, 4 points in 32 games. He's been kind of shuffling in and out of the fourth line, but I don't know. I'll say below expectations for him. Early in the year, I was decently impressed with him and kind of what he could do, but it's really kind of dried up for him and just kind of how he was using his speed and whatnot. The Wild's fourth line was pretty productive early on in the year, but that's kind of gone away now.
Really has.
Nick Seeler, on pace for 6 points, not offensively there, but I think defensively I'll say push, because he's really carried over his defensive play and kind of physical play from what we saw last year. So I give him a push. I don't know about you.
Yeah, again, and maybe this is kind of the Brodin syndrome, but I expect a little more. Maybe I'm just completely.
Not everyone can be Matt Dumba.
No, and I know that, but. I mean, crack 10 points for me, please. You know what I mean? Like, crack 10 points in a season.
Hey, it could happen.
I know, but it's just like, I know you're a third-line defender, but Jiminy Christmas, 7 points? I don't know.
Matt Hendricks, only a point here on the season, just 1 point. On pace for a lovely 2. So I'll say, I'll say a below expectations for me. I'm sure you're in agreement there.
So if you do midseason awards, he is the James Shepard Memorial Press Box Seat Warmer Award winner, I think, for this season, which is kind of the role that he signed up for. I mean, he came home, Blaine native, to play with the Wild, and he even said when he was signed, he's like, I'm here to push guys in the lineup. I'm here to, basically if somebody needs to have their job threatened, that's what Matt Hendricks is around for. That being said, I think he's probably played too many games. 17 games halfway through the season. That's probably a little bit more than I'd like to see him play, quite honestly, because he's pretty worthless.
Greg Patterin has 1 point in 43 games, so he is on pace for just
tied with one Matt Bartkowski.
Yeah.
Matt Bartkowski
in 2 games has more goals.
Has a goal on the season, which is more than Greg Patterin. Greg Patterin's a weird one because I've been fairly okay with his play.
I'll give him a push. And it's teetering on push and slightly below expectations, but I do like his defensive play on the third.
If your expectations of Greg Pattern are he's not Kyle Quincy, he's having a phenomenal season.
Well, then in that case, he's above expectations.
Yes, he is crushing it because he is not Kyle Quincy.
Yes, very good. And then I had Nate Prosser.
Matt Reed, Ryan Murphy, Nate Prosser, none of them really need to. 0 points on the season for all three of those guys, which,
Yeah, who cares?
Yep. Iowa's calling.
Yeah, there you go. There's your mid-season review for the Minnesota Wild. And now we are going to segment right along to the Bruce Boudreau quote of the week.
Hi, this is Bruce Boudreau. I don't see how in Toronto that they're calling it, unless it's a guy they just pulled in off the street that hasn't seen hockey before. If I were the fans, I'd be booing even more because they pay good money for this.
If you want it, don't just think you want it. Go out and f***ing want it.
The Bruce Boudreau quote of the week, Ben. We're going to take an extended listen here to the head coach in the wake of the Saturday night loss to Detroit. The head coach had a spirited media scrum after. It wasn't like Randy Carlyle calling people jerks spirited, but he did offer a lot to say. So I'm gonna play the audio here for everyone to listen to because I want to point out some things he said after the game. So let's take a listen to the head coach.
From that point on, it was the whole game. It wasn't from that point on. Luke had a good shot from where it was, but I mean, that was the worst game that we've played since I've been here as coach. Effort, compete. I don't know where it was. I don't know if they're still tired from this road trip or what have you, but I'm really disappointed in tonight's effort.
Was there a concern coming in that you gave? It was like you almost expected this type of performance against Winnipeg because of it coming off, but you gave it all there. That this was almost going to be like the Arizona game, where it's like you could lift yourself up for Winnipeg, but boom.
Well, the reason we're in the spot we are is because we don't play well against teams that are underneath us in the schedule or in the standings. If we played them like we were playing Winnipeg and all the time, then we'd be up, closer to 60 points than we are where we are. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, we gave an optional yesterday because we thought the mental fatigue would do it, but that'll stop.
Does that make this week, Bruce, not look as maybe encouraging as it could be? Because it looks like you could make hay, and now maybe it's more concerning. It won't be that easy.
Well, to me, and that's when you're looking at all the teams and all the numbers, and you're looking up at the scoreboard, and every team you want to lose is losing, and you just throw a clinker in that. It's very disappointing.
How about just the big players for you guys? Stahl tonight was admittedly not very good. Granlund, a lot of your guys that usually need to show up didn't.
If your best players aren't your best players, you're not going to win a game. That's as simple as that. When I look down and X line is the best line that we have out there, then we're in trouble.
Why was it so tough to generate just shots in the second? There was 0 in the third against Winnipeg. It wasn't as concerning, but 2 in the second when it's still a 2-1, 2-2 game.
That's concerning. I mean, obviously everywhere we went, they skated great. Let's give them a little bit of credit here. They got a really good skating team. And I told the players this morning, I said, I watched that game last night. In the second and third period, they dominated Winnipeg in Winnipeg. So, I mean, we have to beware. And obviously, it was one of those games where we thought we were just going to come out here and throw the jerseys out because we've had a little bit of success recently, and it was going to happen. And it just goes to show if you don't come self-prepared and ready to play, then you're not going to succeed in this league.
All right, so the first thing I'm going to hit on is He said, "This is the worst game we've played since I've been here as coach." I'm inclined to agree. There's obviously been a lot of stinkers in that, but yeah, that was pretty bad. He said effort, compete. I don't know where it was. I'm really disappointed with tonight's effort. The amount of sad Boudreaux gifts I could have made Saturday night would have been astronomical, and I kind of held it to just the couple that I did, but good Lord. And then he goes on to say, the reason we are in the spot we are is we don't play well against the teams underneath us in the standings. If we played them like we did Winnipeg all the time, we would be at 60 points instead of where we are.
He's absolutely right.
And I pointed this out on the recap, but also Ryan Suter after the game, he was asked point blank, I think it was Russo who asked the question, was, did you take this team lightly or were you just worn out from the kind of hectic schedule the team has had? And he said, both. Both. So you have a coach and your star defenseman on record saying, we took them lightly. We don't play well against teams who play below us in the standings. We take them lightly.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. It's...
And then Bruce goes on to say he's going to punish the team now because he gave them Friday an optional skate, and he said that will stop. So he's got the dad mentality there of, you're grounded.
I'm turning this car around.
And then he says, looking up at the scoreboard, every team you want to lose is losing, and you throw a clinker in that. Disappointing. No Bruce. Every team you want to lose has lose. Anaheim cannot win a game to save their life. Randy Carlyle, his ass has to be on fire right now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Edmonton, Vancouver, they can't win a game. Like, I pointed this out in my column earlier this week. The Wild have a chance to put a grip hold on the wild card spot going into the All-Star break. Mm-hmm. And essentially, I just feel like they're going to flounder around for 2 weeks and make it not easy on themselves.
Basically.
And this is what I'm getting out of these quotes here. And Bruce also says, if your best players aren't your best players, you aren't going to win. And then he cited how X-Line was the best line on Saturday night. Yeah, Bruce, if Joel Eriksson Ek is part of your best line, you got problems.
You got big problems.
They didn't shoot the puck on the damn net.
Yeah.
I said that in the preview yesterday. Jimmy Howard or Jonathan Bernier, whoever starts, take shots because the Red Wings have one of the worst goaltending tandems in the league. They were like third worst in the league in goals allowed.
Yeah.
Shoot the bloody puck.
Did they end up, how many shots did they end up with? 18, was it?
It wasn't a lot.
It was under 20.
It was not good.
So, and that's the weird thing about this whole motivational piece. And, you know, I'm not one to question Bruce on it because, you know, I
18 shots against the third worst team in the National Hockey League.
Oh, God, that's awful. So that's the thing, like, the thing with effort and, you know, and Suter touched on it, like taking teams lightly and being kind of worn down. Effort doesn't cost you anything. This isn't like some game where you have to like save up a certain amount of mana to take on a team, or this isn't a thing where like you only have so many coins that you can play to put up a full effort. That's not how hockey works. And if you can't get up for every game, every night, to a certain aspect, I understand maybe you'll come out a little bit flat and maybe make a hard charge later in the game. That didn't happen with this game, you know, or maybe you come out a little bit hot and kind of falter lately. That didn't happen with this game. This was a complete, I mean, this was like Boston on Tuesday night too. You have 2 games this week where there is a complete lack of effort whatsoever. Anything. And it just, that's what's super frustrating. And another quote, you know, going way back to the golden years of Bruce Boudreau on the NHL 24/7 rant. And this is a quote that
led in this segment.
Yeah. This is a quote that I really wish I could put on my work email or somewhere, you know, appropriate, but it was, don't just think you want it. Go out and effing want it. Like that, and that's just, it's as simple as that. Like I think it's such a great quote because it's like a lot of people are like, yeah, I want to be a good hockey player. I want to be a good hockey team. Well, that's freaking wonderful. But you have to actually do it. You actually have to really want it. And it sucks that you're questioning if the Wild really want it. And I think that's where Bruce is, and I totally understand the frustration. Like, that's got to be absolutely infuriating as a coach.
And then here was the boom goes the dynamite to follow that up. Was he said it was one of those games where we came out here and thought we were going to throw the jerseys on because we've had a little bit of success recently. It just goes to show if you don't come self-prepared and ready to play, then you will not succeed in this league.
Yeah.
So here you have Bruce Boudreau calling out your team for not coming to play against a pretty bad team. Essentially what he's saying here is they thought they were going to show up and just, mail it in and get a win. And they didn't. You let Thomas Vanek, for Christ's sakes, destroy you.
He can still play.
Tell that to a local radio host.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, nobody.
So this is what really drove me up a tree, and you can watch my epic ranty recap of this, but this has been the Wild's MO from 2012 on of this Parise Suter era. Mm-hmm. And I always come back to this game specifically when I think about stinkers like this game we had Saturday night. It was game 41 out of 42 in that lockout shortened season.
Sure.
The Wild had a chance to clinch a playoff spot for the first time in 5 years on home ice against one of the worst teams in hockey, the Edmonton Oilers, who I believe went on to win the draft lottery as they always did that year.
Of course, there was like 5 times.
So they go on to, or no, I'm sorry, Colorado did. But anyway, Edmonton's still terrible, not to get away from the point. The Wild went on to just get waxed in that hockey game. They did not come to play that night. And that game has pretty much set the tempo for the rest of the decade. I think it was like 6-1 or 7-1 was the final score that night. But if you can't get up for a game to clinch a playoff spot and you have to go on the road the next night to do it in the last game of the season against another crap team, what's the damn point? Like, and they've always had stinkers like this game. Always. And I even went on to kind of rant about, like, if you're still, like, buying these expensive hockey tickets to go see this team play, how can you justify the amount you're spending when you know you're going to have games like this still in there? Like, I get it. People love sports unconditionally and some teams unconditionally, like, and that's great. Like, and this market, for whatever reason, just continues to eat up the Vikings and buy their tickets and junk, and they continue to crush our souls. But like, how can you justify? Like, it is expensive to go to a hockey game. Yeah. You are spending at minimum now, what, $60 to get in the door.
At least.
A door, mind you, that you're pretty much like getting strip searched apparently now. Right. Unless that doesn't count octopus, apparently. There's no policy at XL Energy Center that has octopus called out as illegal items. Purses are illegal items now, but octopus, no.
Yes.
Anyway, you're spending at minimum this amount of money on tickets, and then you're going to go buy food, whether that's before the game or at the game. You're spending all this money, and then if you want to get merchandise, that's a whole nother. You're taking out a small loan, essentially, to go to a hockey game. And then this is the effort you get treated to. Mm-hmm. I don't understand, like, how you can still justify it. Like, but good on you if you keep doing it. It's just something has to change for somebody like me now to think about buying tickets to a Wild game. Like, The only tickets I bought for a Wild game this season is the one we're going to next week in a different city.
Yeah, no, same here.
And really, more of the crux of the trip is I've never been to Vegas, so it's just taking in a Vegas experience.
Right.
If I wasn't going to the Wild game, I wouldn't be disappointed.
Oh, yeah, no, you wouldn't.
But we are.
In fact, your trip might be better.
Right. I might be better off just putting on a Golden Knights jersey. Yeah. But anyway, to my point, like, people ask me, and in our Bruce Boudreau, people ask me, like, you know, Boudreau's got to be the next one to go, right? Talking about all the coaches in this town who've been fired. Yeah. Paul Molitor was let go at the end of the season. Tom Thibodeau was just thankfully fired to make the Timberwolves watchable again.
Right.
But people ask me, is Bruce Boudreau going to be the next one to go? And I say no, and sometimes I cut them off because I say no. And Bruce Boudreau isn't the problem. The team is the problem, and it has been the problem. And if you think it's a coaching problem, then what the hell do you take every morning that makes you the way you are? Because I want that. I want that. I want to smell roses every morning. Bruce Boudreau, and I referenced this earlier in the week when Jason Zucker had that 2-goal game on Thursday against the Jets. In I think it was Russo's piece after the game. He pointed out how Boudreau and Zucker had a chat before practice that morning. It was before Boudreau did a radio hit. He was a few minutes late to his radio hit because he was chatting with Jason Zucker, and who had been in that goal-scoring drought that I referenced earlier. And basically what Boudreau could have done was he could have ripped Jason Zucker a new asshole, said, you're going down to the fourth line, you're going to not be on the power play. Basically, he could have given him the Mike Yeo doghouse treatment.
Which Mike Yeo did several times.
He did not. Instead, what he said was, you're a good hockey player. We know you are a good hockey player. We want you to play like a good hockey player. Go out and do what you do best. And he went out and he scored twice that night.
Right.
And to me, that cries out, this is a coach who still can communicate with his players, who gets through to his players. And I worry, and I said this again on the recap, that because Paul Fenton has tried, through time, we've heard that Paul Fenton has tried to make trades. You know, in the summer or the season or whatever, he's tried to make some trades to kind of mix up this team a little bit, shake them to kind of jar this crap out of them.
Right.
But he's not getting the value he wants in return. And my worry now becomes if he feels like he's not going to get the value he wants for making some kind of a trade for whatever players are involved, then the only move he's going to have in his bag is to fire the head coach, which would be an extreme mistake on his part. Bruce Boudreau isn't the problem. The team is the problem. Bruce Boudreau has overachieved with the Minnesota Wild in 2.5 seasons.
Sure.
100+ points each year with this group is incredibly overachieving.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, does your boss motivate you to work? It's kind of like that. Like how much of it is on the players at the end of the day? Like we can't act like this team is any different than it was under Mike Yeo. But it's better. To your point, I mean, Mike Yeo never, I don't think, eclipsed 100 points.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, he did.
The one year
yeah,
Devin Dubnyk
right.
was acquired in January to save his rear end.
Exactly. So yeah, they did the one time. But you know, this team is better than it was under Yeo, and I think that's pretty obvious. But you know, still, it just kind of goes back to this team isn't as good as a lot of people would like, and these players haven't developed, and you still get, you know, these uneven efforts from these players, and then you wonder why their point totals are disappointing at the end of the season, because you haven't, you know, because they go 15 games scoring 1 goal, or, you know, 10, 12 games without scoring any goals, or stuff like that we've seen out of the Zuckers, the Coyles, the Niederreiters, the, you know, et cetera, Koivus, Stahl at this point. yeah, it just comes down to that. It's a talent thing, and I think you're right. I got the same question last night about Boudreaux. Is he the next to go? And I hope he's not. That's a card that GMs and all of professional sports play all the time. Fire the coach. I mean, it's a hell of an emotional shakeup on the team, and that's why it looks effective right off the bat a lot of the times. But I think it's safe to say a lot of the times the team isn't any better off at the end of the day. And
No.
depending on who the coach is, I mean, Thibodeau, obviously, that's maybe a better example of it actually being a good thing, because that was a culture issue more than anything, and the whole Jimmy Butler saga obviously played out right in front of us. But that's not this situation. This isn't a Tom Thibodeau situation with Bruce Boudreau. This isn't a situation where, he's alienating people in the locker rooms. He's making very obviously bad decisions about either personnel or his rotation or whatever. Like, this isn't that kind of situation at all. It's definitely a situation where the players need to get up for every game. And that's on Bruce a little bit too, but he can't play the game for them. So it can't all be on him.
All right, I think I've ranted enough. If you want my full thoughts, go on the YouTube channel or our Facebook page and give the rant a look. But all right, but we're going to move out of the Bruce Boudreau segment into our Krill Watch.
Oh, good.
Kaprizov across for Gusev. Kaprizov shoots and he scores! He scores! The Russians are golden in South Korea.
Kirill Kaprizov, our Wild fans' beloved Russian winger who continues to electrify us with goals over on the other side of the world, just to rub salt in the wound that they can't have him yet. But he did have quite a nice goal on, I believe that was Friday, where he goes, Saturday. He goes end-to-end with his team, CSKA Moscow. We tweeted this from our Twitter account, just end-to-end goal, and it was a snipe, too, from the face-off dot, but absolutely electrifying goal from Kirill Kaprizov, who now, on the season with CSKA Moscow, has 20 goals, 10 assists in 43 games. So that's an update on him. We try to get those video highlights out to Wild fans from our Twitter account at GATG Wild Podcast, just to make sure you keep up the miserable. So there you go. He also had another goal. Maybe it's the same one. Anyway, there's some good goals there. So we always try to get those out. So that's a quick update on him. Ben, is there another prospect you wish to highlight?
Sure. So this is a guy we haven't talked about in quite a while. I try to spread the love around when it comes to Wild prospects,
except for one.
Yeah, well, except for Kirill. I mean, he gets all of our love, but the rest.
No. I'm saying there's one you just don't give any love to.
Oh, is it our friend Philip?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so this is a kid that I haven't talked about since the beginning of the season. He got out to a really hot start in the WHL with the Everett Silvertips. And to his credit, he has continued that hot start. Connor Dewar, he was a third round pick by the Minnesota Wild this past summer. And he has really turned out to be a gem that they found in the third round. Everyone, as drafty nerd types, really enjoyed that pick. Thought it was a good upside pick, and really has turned out to be. He's played 40 games in the WHL, 57 points. I mean, we're talking nearly a 1.5 pace per game. 29 goals, 28 assists, very good balance. He's kind of a little bit of a smaller guy, 5'10", 175 pounds, but, obviously he's only 19, so there's still, maybe some muscle to add there. And he's got a pretty decent reputation as a guy who can dangle a little bit, got a little bit of hands, a little bit of a dynamic offensive player, and he's really shown that. And there's not a whole lot to get excited about in the Wild Farm system, as evidenced by our friend Philip Johansson. But Connor Dewar is one of them. I think he tops the list right now in points by a Wild Farm hand outside of the NHL. So Really looking forward to seeing where he progresses. The WHL is a pretty legit junior league. It's not like he's doing this in some weird fourth tier Swedish league or something like that. It is, up there with the best of the Canadian juniors. So interesting to see how he turns out, what kind of career he ends up having. But I mean, could be a guy that they turn a third rounder into, maybe even a top 6 player if he can continue this kind of pace. And then that's something that you don't see a whole lot. So you really kind of have to savor those. So Connor DeWar, look forward to him maybe coming to a Wild roster near you in a couple of seasons.
There you go. All right, on to our Central Intelligence.
Central Intelligence.
Yeah, I've been scoreboard watching since opening night. So I don't know if that counts or anything, but I think hockey players are hockey players, and they want to see where they are, and they know how close everything is. They know that every game is vital.
Central Intelligence report this week. Winnipeg Jets and the Nashville Predators tied atop Central Division with 58 points. Bruce referencing in his post-game quotes that the Wild could, win the games they need to win. They would be closer to that point mark. But the Dallas Stars at 50 points. I found Jim Montgomery's Saturday night's post-game presser to be entertaining, as well as he pretty much said he couldn't get the I kind of can't remember the exact line, because I saw you retweeted it, and I think it was like a Wyshynski quote tweet. But essentially, he said, "I'm very frustrated that I've not been able to gain consistency in our performance, and I haven't been able to change the culture of mediocrity."
And the Stars are just the love boat this season. I love this. This is a whole lot of fun watching the Dallas Stars implode.
And Wyshynski had a great quote tweet of that, where he said, "Really digging this new approach to management from the Stars, in which they discuss the team like a sports talk radio caller." If that's not hitting the nail on the head, then I don't know what is. But man,
Stars fan line via the CEO and the head coach.
Oh Lord! But so that's where the Dallas Stars are at. They've lost 2 in a row, including that clunker of the St. Louis Blues 3-1 on Saturday night. And then you have the Colorado Avalanche at 48 points. They've lost 3 in a row and 9 out of 10. As we saw earlier in the week, Nathan McKinnon yelling at his head coach Jared Bednar on the bench before falling over on the bench. Hilarity ensues, folks. The Central Division, from pretty much Dallas moving on down, is just a disaster right now. Then you have the Minnesota Wild at 47 points. They're holders of the last wild card spot in the Western Conference.
Amazes me.
Which is amazing. And as we mentioned, Bruce Boudreau had the kind of ripped his team to shreds. Anaheim, 46 points. Edmonton, 45. Vancouver, 45. Right behind the Wild for the last wild card spot. And then in the division, you have the St. Louis Blues at 42 points. They've won 2 in a row and 6 out of their last 10. They're kind of pulling around here. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but they're playing better. And you have the Chicago Blackhawks at 41 points in the Central Division. So,
which is a lot of fun.
There you go. Yeah, quite a division. The Central Division used to be considered one of the best in the National Hockey League. Now it is at one of the worst.
Yeah, I didn't mention it on Thursday night that that win moved the Wild into a playoff spot. And I'm a little shocked to see they're still in said playoff spot after the game last night.
Like, Anaheim has lost 10 in a row. 7-3 in their last 10.
Oh, my Lord.
They are bad.
Yeah.
And John Gibson is playing out of his mind, and they're still losing 10 in a row.
I know.
How bad do you have to be to not win a bloody game with John Gibson playing out of his mind like he is?
Yeah, every advanced metric shows John Gibson is one of, if not the best goaltenders in the NHL.
Save John Gibson, as I just tweeted to our friend Tony, who cited some advanced metrics that shows how bad the Wild goalies have been this year and how great John Gibson has been. Right. I just replied to him, John Gibson to the Wild, #confirmed.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I don't know. I don't know how the Ducks pull it off. And I don't know how the Wild are still in the playoff spot as up and down as they've been. But it really does speak to your point as to how bad the rest of the Central has been. And the Pacific, for that matter. The Pacific is usually, I mean, they've historically been the bad division. Though Central has sent both wildcard teams, I believe, since the inception of that playoff system, haven't they? They've had both wildcard. Maybe one year there was a Pacific team creeped in. But the Central has really dominated that playoff look with the 2 wildcard teams coming from the West. And, this year it's really a crap race. Like nobody wants these wildcard spots. Everyone's just playing like garbage.
Like Jake Allen. All right. That's the Central Intelligence Report, Ben. And then last but not least, we are moving right into jerseys.
Woo!
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Well, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
All right, Ben. Jerseys for this week, as you can either listen to on this podcast or check out on our YouTube channel that we're making into a video segment. Last week we did our Mount Rushmore of jerseys. This week we're going to hit on our Mount Poopmore of jerseys, as we alluded to earlier in the show. And to get us leading off here, Ben, what jersey are you putting right on your Mount Poopmore?
I think it'd be, there's a lot of jerseys that I think earn spots on the Poopmore, but I'm going to go with the Buffalo Slug, the 2000s era Buffalo Sabres jersey, where they decided to kill off one of my favorites, the sneering Buffalo of the late 90s, and they decided to replace it with some kind of legless Buffalo smear across their jerseys. And It was very widely made fun of by a lot of people and for a lot of good reasons. And I think, it was, I don't know that
a smear.
Yeah, I don't know that it typified the Reebok Edge system, but I feel like the Reebok Edge needs to be represented on my Mount Rushmore as well, because there was so much that we really hated about the Reebok Edge systems. I think the Avalanche are probably, a great example of decent jerseys gone horribly wrong via the Reebok Edge. But the Buffalo Slug, I think, was, just kind of a bad concept, bad execution. It was just kind of across the board. It was really bad. It was just something where, I don't know, they needed to replace the jersey they had, because I did enjoy it. If they wanted to get back to the original colors, I sort of understand that. But they just really jumped the shark with the logo and the whole jersey, for that matter.
The Buffalo smear.
I should patent that.
There you go. So I am leading off with a jersey that we've discussed ad nauseum in this segment many a times before. But in the 90s, in the midst of their ownership change with that weird crap going on with, what was his name? Dean Spano, I believe.
Yes.
The New York Islanders transitioned out of their very iconic orange and blue jerseys, and they introduced the Gortman's Fisherman jersey, which, if you're looking at it on the video, good Lord. Even the logo itself that was replaced, that has become kind of, iconic. This jersey is probably the best exemplified of the 90s. In terms of 90s, it referenced by, or maybe, challenged by, I should say, Burger King and Wild Wing and maybe another. But the Gortman's Fisherman is probably the most egregious one of the 90s, just because of what they replaced. And then the backlash they received was so bad that they after 1 year, they brought back the original Islanders crest, and then I think it was like another year later, they just transitioned out of those jerseys entirely. But the color was bad. The wavy stripes on the jerseys just wasn't working for anyone. The numbers were weird.
They're angled.
Everything was bad about those jerseys. And they take number one place on my Mount Poopmore of jerseys.
Yeah, that's I don't know. I think there's a lot of people that have a soft spot for the Gordon's Fisherman jerseys, though, don't you? Like, I know our friend Taylor Calais was an odd fan of that, and then I feel like that's a jersey where it can only be a guilty pleasure jersey. Nobody's going to claim that's a good jersey by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like that's a jersey that it was so bad that people kind of like it in a nostalgic kind of way.
So bad. Ben, what do you have at number 2?
Well, I'm going to go way back to the 70s, and the Vancouver Canucks did a redesign where they changed everything, really. They changed their color, their logos, everything, and they came out with the infamous V jerseys. And we call them the V jerseys because that's all they were, was a gigantic V. And it was...
V for Vancouver.
Yeah, and you can slip in all of the V for Vendetta jokes you want, but they had something like 9 Vs on the jerseys between the socks, the sleeves, and the giant unsightly V on the chest. But maybe the worst part of these jerseys is that these jerseys introduced the flying skate to us, but relegated it to a shoulder patch. Which is a real shame because that is a really nice logo that I think a lot of us really enjoy. Not just us 90s nostalgic types, but I think a lot of people really do enjoy the flying skate logo. And it was relegated to being caught in a sea of V's on this unfortunate jersey. I think if you slip a V in there somewhere, on the sleeve or something like that, I think it works for Vancouver. But Jesus Christ, Giles.
I couldn't hold it together. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I killed my mic there. There we go. All right. So I think if you have one on the jersey, that's fine. But when you are trying to literally throw as many angles into a jersey as you possibly can, you might be running into a bad design.
So the next jersey that I had is also from the Vancouver Canucks, but it came much later in the 90s as the Vancouver Canucks. They transitioned out of the V, and they went with more of a traditional-looking jersey with the flying skate as the crest.
It was great.
But then I think it's like 95 or 96 or something, they introduced a alternate jersey that was with that crest, but it was half red, half black, and had a giant check mark essentially in it. And it's an orange check mark that just runs right through the middle of the jersey.
Yeah,
and my God, that is just bad. And also, I feel like the Vancouver Canucks have the worst third jerseys you'll ever see, because later on, I'm also going to give an honorable mention. This isn't on my Mount Poopmore, but
it's on there.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we're going to come to that.
We'll save it. I'll do that one next.
So this one that from the 90s, like it just it screams horrible 90s. Fortunately, there was no teal, so I guess that's a bonus. But this was
the one team that didn't try teal.
There was a very short-lived experiment there, as Pavelbure wore that, for Christ's sakes.
Oh, that's a shame. Yeah, so speaking of which, as you mentioned, in the late 90s, the Canucks redesigned to the Flying Shamu jerseys for whatever reason we'll never understand, and they still stick with that logo to this day. Whatever. It is what it is with the whole Orca thing, but then they came out with a third jersey where it had a gradient color to it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it fades from navy at the top to red at the bottom. And that's not something that's ever really been done on an NHL jersey before. Usually there's some kind of line, like you mentioned, the unsightly check mark. They just made a gradual color change, kind of like how Arizona football does, which never looks good. There isn't a single situation where I see a jersey with gradient colors and I'm like, wow, that is a hot look right there. That looks great. I mean, you can do the Tequila Sunrise thing. That actually had like stripes to it. You can do color changes, but don't Microsoft Paint airbrush fade them into another like that. I think it just looks awful.
Manchester United does that this year on their home kits. They have a gradient scheme where
why?
it goes from red to black at the end to go with their black shorts. So like the very bottom of the jersey it just fades to black. So it's bad. It's a bad look for them. Don't do that, folks. And so the third jersey I have on my list is something that our friend of the show, Craig Custance, will fondly remember, was the Atlanta Thrashers, their maroon third jerseys that had the, I don't know what, the bird-looking thing on the shoulders that was like flying like right over the shoulders. And then it had Thrashers across the chest and then the numbers under it. Woof. Picking out of the Atlanta Thrashers jerseys was difficult, but this one took the cake. And this is on my Mount Poopmore because they are genuinely awful. And that includes that 50 Shades of Blue jersey that they had at the end. But this jersey is just so epically terrible. And there's a lot of epically terrible Thrashers jerseys, and probably why they're now moved away. But that is just a terrible, terrible look, and they should never, ever come out of the closet again.
Yeah, I don't think that franchise ever killed it with merchandise sales. Maybe not the reason why they had to move out of Atlanta, but it might have been a contributing factor that I think a lot of people don't think of enough. My final Mount Poopmore hockey jersey is something that not only was a jersey that looked bad, but a jersey that I think both of us agree, and a lot of people agree, was a personal affront to us. A jersey that I think felt like it was a personal attack to all things good and 90s. And that was the Anaheim Ducks redesign, where they killed off the Mighty. They were no longer of Anaheim. They were just Anaheim. It just was ducks across the front of the jersey. Kind of, I don't want to say baseballish, but kind of in a baseballish way. Just awful. And what made it worse is they won a Stanley Cup in these jerseys, and
they obliterated the Wild in the playoffs.
Yeah, that too. But I've never been a fan of the color scheme. I've never been a fan of a duck's foot being your logo when you have something much better in your history that you could have pulled from. And also, there was a very fascinating article from, I believe, from Uniwatch, where they kind of went over the redesign and all of the options that that team had. Ducks aren't a terrible thing to have. My college was actually the Mighty Wood Ducks. You could have done a lot more with ducks than having a nasty mud-covered, algae-covered foot as your logo for the Mighty Ducks, transitioning to the Anaheim Ducks.
Can we talk about Mighty Wood Ducks?
Yeah, Century College, White Bear Lake.
Oh, my good Lord. All right, that answers that. So the last jersey I am going to put on my Mount Poopmore is probably the universal Poopmore jersey of this podcast. We have referenced it time and time again as the introduced in 2003, the Dallas Stars went with the infamous Mooterus jersey in which they tried to incorporate the constellation Taurus on this jersey. And essentially what they got was a crest that looked like a uterus.
Yeah.
So that is an epic fail. It's black, and then it has red and green. Where in the damn hell did red come from?
Yeah.
Why are you trying to incorporate red into a franchise that has no past history of red?
None whatsoever.
None. Why? Like, why? Like, this was the beginning of the... it's not the beginning, but it's just part of the stain of the Dallas Stars' history of jerseys since the transition to black in 92. And this one is an easy one to put on my Mount Rushmore. I'm sorry, not Mount Rushmore, Mount Poopmore.
Yes.
But good Lord, what a disastrous jersey. And Justin finally just got that pulled up, and
it's a uterus.
He fell up. Yeah. He fell out of his chair, folks.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Mr. Sulu, Mr. Sulu's console just blew up in his face. So that is it, and that is our Mount Poopmore.
Yeah.
we hope you enjoyed those hideous things. We did have some people reply to us on Twitter when we asked kind of what people's worst jerseys was. I think the one egregious one that neither of us mentioned was, you talked about Buffalo earlier, but the yellow front and blue back Buffalo Sabres jerseys from 5 years ago. Those things were awful.
They were bad.
And they should have been thrown into the fire. A couple other honorable mentions I'll just say are, like, I think of like the Philadelphia Flyers a couple years ago for their 50th season. They had like Vegas gold trim on their jerseys. Get those the hell out of here.
No, it was dumb.
The Los Angeles Kings and their like 2000s jerseys, those are terrible. Get out of here.
You didn't even mention the Burger King. The Burger King is kind of in the Gordon's Fisherman realm, where it's so ugly.
It's bad.
It's
bad,
so ugly.
folks.
You're like, I really, man, I need to see it. Like, I need to have this jersey because it's so bad.
The Ottawa Senators, somebody replied with their jersey that was introduced in 97.
Yes.
Apparently, it did make it into the 90s, even though I didn't think that was possible.
Also, without mentioning their Sens jerseys as well.
Yeah,
those were pretty awful.
The
jerseys.
Super Nintendo jerseys.
Yes.
And that's... Oh, we didn't talk about like the Tampa Bay Lightning, their third jersey from the 90s.
The
with
stormy seas.
Yeah,
yes.
with the waves and the storm and all that junk. That's pretty bad as well. So
a lot of jerseys could have made Mount Poopmores, I believe.
Yeah.
And like, as difficult as it was to name our Mount Rushmores, which it was very hard.
This was equally difficult.
This was equally as difficult because as much good as there is out there, there is equal amounts of bad. Very, very bad.
Yeah. And I will, I'll give, even though it's not a jersey that never saw the light of day, we would have to remember the St. Louis Blues horned jersey.
The flying trumpets, yeah.
Yeah, the trumpets everywhere.
Luckily, they never saw the light of
day. Mike Keenan had about an aneurysm, and he probably murdered some team employee after seeing that, let's be honest. So there you go. So that is our Mount Poopmore. And that will do it for this otherwise fine podcast. Thank you for listening. If you followed along on the YouTube channel again this week, thank you so much for watching. If you have any kind of ideas for what you would like us to do more with this, feel free to send us some suggestions. We are very open to kind of how we want to do this jersey segment and making it a good video production. We're not Andy Carlson in terms of video production, but we can try to get halfway there maybe. But yeah, so again, thank you for following along. And if you're still listening to just the podcast portion of this, thank you for listening to this in the entirety. Hopefully next week when we come back in Vegas, we'll be a little more positive and spirited. We've been, at least I have.
Be spirited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's plenty of that in Vegas.
Definitely going to be spirited in Vegas.
So thank you to that. Thank you for everyone for listening. Again, follow Ben and I on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell, podcast Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast. Give us a follow on the YouTube channel if you're watching. Still, please click that subscribe button in the corner. It does help us out. If you listen on iTunes, give us an iTunes rating. We do like those, good or bad. We have fun reading those. Mm-hmm. So follow us at Zone Coverage on Twitter at Zone Coverage MN, zonecoverage.com/wild. That should just about do it for us.
Don't forget the Boothcast Monday night.
Yes.
If you're listening to this on Monday, we will be doing a commentary on the Wild Flyers game Monday night. So look forward to that.
Don't forget, next week we're in Vegas. Again, if you're going to Vegas, check out our Facebook for the event page and where we're going to meet up prior to the Wild game. So give that a look as well. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you to Justin for producing this otherwise fine show, and we will chat with you next week.
Later.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.